The clock ticked past 10 p.m. Rain lashed against the windows, each drop like a tiny hammer against glass. An unsettling quiet had settled over the house, broken only by the intermittent rumble of thunder in the distance. Suddenly, a sharp rap on the door shattered the silence. The unexpected sound sent a jolt through me, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. Who could be out there, braving the storm at this time of night? Curiosity warred with apprehension as I made my way to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a figure silhouetted against the stormy night. He wore the familiar blue vest of an Amazon delivery driver, his face obscured by the hood pulled low over his head. He held a package in his hand, rain streaming from its edges. I unlocked the door and cracked it open, a wave of cold, damp air rushing in. "Package for, the driver mumbled, squinting at a device in his hand. The flickering light from the porch cast eerie shadows across his face, making it impossible to make out his features. His voice was low and gruff, barely audible over the howling wind. "Yes, that's me," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the prickling sensation crawling up my spine. He thrust the package towards me, his movements stiff and mechanical. "Sign here," he muttered, pointing to a small screen on the device. I scribbled my signature, my hand trembling slightly, as the rain dripped from his hood onto the screen. The driver simply grunted in response, turning away without another word. I watched as he melted back into the stormy night, his retreating figure swallowed by the darkness. Closing the door, I leaned against it for a moment, my heart still pounding in my chest. The encounter, though brief, had left me feeling deeply unsettled. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The package felt strangely heavy in my hands, its weight oddly unevenly distributed. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, devoid of any shipping labels or markings. Curiosity battled with a growing sense of foreboding as I turned the package over in my hands. As I turned to head back inside, a flicker of movement caught my eye. It was just outside the window, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and shapeless. I froze, holding my breath as I strained to see through the rain-streaked glass. But there was nothing there. Despite telling myself it was just my imagination, the feeling of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the image of those eyes, watching me from the darkness. A shiver ran down my spine, and I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me with a sense of urgency I couldn't quite explain. The package lay on the table where I'd left it, an ominous presence in the dimly lit room. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, my mind racing with 1,000 unsettling possibilities. What was inside? And why was it delivered so late, in the middle of a storm, by a driver who seemed as if he'd rather be anywhere else? I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep down, a primal instinct whispered that something was terribly wrong. Steeling myself, I reached out and hesitantly picked up the package. It was heavier than it looked and cold to the touch, as if it had been stored in a freezer. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers hovering over the package. Part of me wanted to just throw it away, to get rid of whatever unsettling presence it held. But curiosity, like a siren's call, drew me in, urging me to uncover its secrets. The package was secured with several layers of thick packing tape. As I began to peel it away, I noticed something strange. The tape underneath, instead of being the usual clear adhesive, was a deep crimson red. Underneath the layers of tape, I found a plain wooden box. It was old and weathered, its surface scratched and worn smooth with time. There were no markings on it, no indication of its origins or contents. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest, as I slowly lifted the lid. The hinges creaked, their mournful groan echoing in the silence of the room. I held my breath, bracing myself for whatever lay inside. The interior of the box was lined with faded red velvet, its once luxurious texture now worn thin and threadbare. Resting on the velvet lining was a single object, a small ornate mirror. Its frame was crafted from tarnished silver, intricately engraved with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist before my eyes. The mirror itself was dark, almost black, as if reflecting not light but some profound inner darkness. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and picked up the mirror. It was cold to the touch, sending a chill that seemed to penetrate to my very core. The symbols seemed vaguely familiar, like something I had seen in a dream or a long-forgotten book. They formed a pattern, a spiral, that seemed to draw my gaze inward, towards the dark, reflective surface of the mirror. Suddenly the lights flickered and dimmed, plunging the room into an unsettling twilight. The shadows seemed to lengthen and twist, taking on strange, menacing shapes in the flickering light. A cold draft swept through the room, chilling me to the bone. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to find the source of the draft. But the windows were closed, the curtains still. The draft seemed to be coming from the mirror itself, a cold, ethereal wind that carried with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unutterably foul. As I watched in horror, the reflection in the mirror began to change. The room around me, dimly lit and familiar, faded away, replaced by a swirling vortex of darkness. In the depths of that swirling abyss, I saw fleeting glimpses of things I couldn't comprehend. Grotesque shapes, twisted and malevolent, their eyes burning with a cold, inhuman light. The lights flickered once more, and then died completely, plunging the room into absolute darkness. I stood there, frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. The only sounds were the pounding of my own heart and the low, mournful howl of the wind outside. Panic welled up inside me, threatening to overwhelm my senses. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I struggled to turn on the flashlight. The sudden beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the room around me, seemingly unchanged, yet somehow different, as if imbued with a newfound sense of menace. And then I saw it. The Amazon package lay open on the table, the box containing the mirror overturned beside it. But the mirror itself was gone. A cold dread washed over me, gripping my heart in an icy fist. My gaze fell on the wall opposite me, and my blood ran cold. There, hanging on the wall where a moment ago there had been nothing, was the mirror. I rushed towards the mirror, my mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. How did it get there? Had I been so terrified that I hadn't noticed it before? Or had it impossibly moved there on its own? I reached out and touched the cold, smooth surface of the mirror. As my fingers brushed against the glass, a jolt of energy surged through my body, throwing me backwards onto the floor. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. Scrambling to my feet, I stumbled back from the mirror, my gaze fixed on its dark, reflective surface. The room around me seemed to warp and distort, the familiar surroundings taking on a nightmarish quality. The shadows seemed to writhe and pulsate, as if alive. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from that mirror. Grabbing a nearby lamp, I raised it above my head and brought it crashing down on the mirror. The glass shattered, sending shards flying across the room. But even as the mirror broke, I could have sworn I heard a sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. I stood there for a moment, panting, my heart pounding in my chest as adrenaline coursed through my veins. The broken shards of the mirror lay scattered on the floor, their dark surfaces reflecting the flickering light of the dying lamp. And then, slowly, the shadows began to recede. The air grew still, and the room returned to normal. The storm outside had subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence. Even though the mirror was gone, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't seen the last of it. That somewhere, out there in the darkness, something ancient and evil was watching me, waiting for its chance to return. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind replaying the horrifying events over and over again. The next morning, I gathered up the broken shards of the mirror and threw them away, along with the strange package and everything else that had come with it. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a bad dream, a figment of my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some things can't be unseen, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed.